Yes, this is totally worth it. This is Ship of Magic, Book 1 of the Liveship Traders by Robin Hobb. Here's a chart showing everything that Robin Hobb has ever written. Actually, the first stuff that she wrote down here in the 80s was under the name Megan Lindholm. So there's some fantasy, there's also some science fiction here. And then she decided to have a pen name which was a bit more generic, a bit more androgynous, shall we say. And she published the first Farseer book under that name, Robin Hobb. And so how I've organized this is basically this whole section up the top here is the realm of the Elderlings. She also did this Soldier Son trilogy, which is unrelated, and then there are all these short stories which are actually part of the realm of the Elderlings. So we are dealing here with the Liveship Trader series, and I am reading the first book, Ship of Magic, published in 1998. And I'm going to give you my random spoiler-free thoughts as I read this book. The prologue dumps you straight in. You know it's a fantasy book. There's these weird sea snake creatures and there's this unfamiliar terminology. There's a lot to absorb in the first 60 pages. There are many plot threads and a lot of characters are introduced in separate vignettes. And that's probably one of my first major comments about this book as I read further. There's a lot of talking and ruminating, kind of hanging around in people's heads. The story's told in third person, limited point of view, and it can be almost exhausting because there's so much detail, but it's just so well done. People always say how Robin Hobb is the master of character writing, and it's just so true. At times you'll be in one person's head and they're giving their perspective and seeing a particular character, another character from their perspective and seeing them, and you're thinking, gee, that person is absolutely horrible. And then later you'll be in the head of someone else who is sympathetic to that character, and they'll be in a totally different situation, and so you can see why they are sympathetic to that character because they see a different side to that person. And this is the case for the full cast of characters. It's really quite amazing. Speaking of talking, there's not a lot of action in this book. It's actually a lot of family drama. At times I felt like I was reading Pride and Prejudice. And although it's set in a fantasy world, it's a fantasy book, it actually feels very realistic. And it's not a happy story. She makes you really hate the son-in-law in the family. In fact, a lot of it can kind of be quite depressing because of all the bad things that happen to everyone. There better be a damn good payoff by the end of the third book. Now, I did say there's a lot to absorb in the first 60 pages. Actually, the first 30 pages are a bit hard going, but after that, it does become much easier. It's actually an easy book to read. In fact, I'd almost say if you're unsure about this book, skip the prologue and the first chapter and start reading from the second chapter, and then only when Kenneth makes a second appearance, or rather the first appearance if you're reading from chapter 2, go back and read the first chapter and the prologue. Speaking of Kenneth, he's this guy that wants to become the king of the pirates, and he's actually a really funny character. He's very selfish and totally clueless about people, but he has this crazy luck that makes everyone think he's absolutely amazing. And he's often totally surprised at how his actions work out. He reminded me a bit of Matt from The Wheel of Time and his crazy luck. The one downside I'd say about this book is that it is very long, and for quite a part of it I was thinking, where is this going? And the ending wasn't blow your socks off. It was decent. I did predict some of the stuff that was going to happen about 200 pages beforehand. But it was a decent ending. It is obviously the first book in the trilogy, so obviously there's more to come, and it was a good ending. But that's not really why you read this series. It really is the character work. The character work in these books is just amazing. So all in all, I think, yes, this could have been a shorter book, but I still think it's excellent, and I'm giving it 4.5 stars. Now, a quick comment on the maps. The map is decent. It's got that kind of piratey treasure map aesthetic with the ripped edges and the scrolly parts. In terms of its use in the story, it's fairly minimal. In fact, most of the time it feels like the places in the story are totally divorced from the map. There are details and loads of islands on the map that are never mentioned, and there are heaps of places spoken about in the book that aren't labelled on the map. And so for that reason, I give this map 3 out of 5, not because of the design, but because of the relation to the story and how there's that disconnect. So that's it for my review of the first book. The second book is The Mad Ship, and I'll be getting to this very soon. I will have a review of that when I'm done. All right, I'll see you in the next video.